Yom Rishon, Yud Bais Elul, Hey Tovshin Gimel, Shiurim Chumash, Tovi Pasha Rishon Pirish Rashi, Tilim Samavot Samaches, Lamadal Lamadvov, Tanya Yudal Laeder, 240 Maila. Hamsech Hagodol Hayadua, the great and well-known series of Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab, which is known b'shem by the title B'shor She'egdimu Te'erav. It starts with Shavuos. That when the B'shor She'egdimu Yisrael Nasal and Nishma, when the Jewish people said Nasal and Nishma, Bo Malach Gemara, Bo Malach Ashar, Malachim came and they gave them two ksarim, two crowns, Echad Kineged Nasa, Echad Kineged Nishma. And you know how the Maimorim go, right? That if they got two crowns for saying Nasa before Nishma, they should have gotten either 3 or 1. Because they didn't get a crown for saying Nashma and for saying Nishma, as the Gemara says. Shoshagdimu Yisrael Nasa, for Nasa before Nishma. And then the Gemara continues and says, Echad Kineged Nasa. In other words, it's a stira mereish l'sefer. Why were they given crowns? For saying Nasa and Nishma, for saying Nasa before Nishma? So the Maimonides bring a medrash. Mashal Melech. The king comes into a city and the people gave him 3 crowns. Not al shtayim, not al echad nosam bereisha. 1 crown he keeps, and 2 crowns he gives to his children. So the Maimorim explain that there's really 3 ksarim. The crown of Nasa and the crown of Nishma, which he gives us. The crown of Kdima Nasa Nishma, this he keeps, which is the deepest inyan. So of course the Maimon goes away talking about Kesed, whatever, Ayin Bezes. Like I told you last week, in the old print is 1,447 pages. I just got in the mail on Friday, Krach Hey. They're working over the Ayin Bais. They're doing a beautiful job. So they just finished now all the Maimorim. Til Vavaya Mamachasa Tafish Hayim Vav. And they have to make now 2 more Krachim, I think. One of Nechelik Shlei Nitfas on the part that was never said. And then also on the Hisafis. They wrote in the beginning how they're going to be dividing it up. But I got volume 5 of the redone Hamshech Hayim Beis with Malmakemith and Onis. And it doesn't say a single name. It doesn't even say Ma'arecha Seitzer Achsidim. The Maimah comes out on the front page. There's a title. We're printing Hayim Beis and no one signs it. When the Maimorim used to come out years and years and years ago, the Rebbe used to sign his own name, Harav, and the Rebbe's first name, Shneerson. Then around Tavshin Tezvav, the Rebbe felt like he doesn't have enough personal time to pay attention to the printing, so he changed it to Marechas Eitzel Achsidim, that he's trusting other people, so he didn't want to use his own name, he writes Marechas Eitzel Achsidim. The one place where the Rebbe continued signing his own name, as I told you many times, was his father's Sfarim. Any sefer that came out from the Rebbe's father, including the summer of Nun Aleph, begins Teda La Hashem, Higiyas Chus, thank God I was given a great chus, kis v'yad amur zal, and then the Rebbe signs his own personal name when he gave it out for print. But after a certain point, my mother came out. When the Rebbe printed the Ayin Beis, the Rebbe was pashut afraid. He said publicly, "I'm afraid. Everybody should give $1. We should all be shutzim in the printing." And it came out be'elam shem. It doesn't say who worked on it. It doesn't say who wrote the footnotes. It doesn't say who edited it. It doesn't say who typed it. It doesn't say who, anything, who bound it. It just, a book came out like as if it has no balabas. And there's no signature. It doesn't even say Ma'arechas Eitzel Achsidim, because the Rebbe said I'm afraid. Anyway, so the Rebbe is speaking about this Hamshech Ayin Beis, which, like I said, in the old print it's 1,447 pages. In the new print, when it's done, it'll probably be over 2,000 pages. Hischil Amor Marashab La'omre, the Rebbe Rashab began to say it. Yom Aleph, the Chag HaShavuos, the first day of Shavuos, Terav 1912, which is more than 2 years before the beginning of the First World War, Bilubavitch. Vesima, he finished saying it. Shabbos, Pashas, Vayera, Tafresh Hayim Vav, the Shabbos at the end of the year, it was still 1915. It was right in the middle of the First World War. Birostov, in Rostov. Now I told this to you last week and I got some of you upset. So I went home and I reached out to Yoyde Dover and he said, he wrote me back. He said, Shaila Yeshona. the Rebbe Rashab did not finish this Maimed in Rostov. He finished it in Lubavitch. It says Rostov, yeah? Shabbos, Pashas, Vayera, Tafesh Hayimov, Rostov. Pashas, Vayera, Tafesh Hayimov, the Rebbe Rashab was in Lubavitch. He left on Sunday, Pashas Chaysan. In other words, the facts on the ground. I looked up, I have a 150-year calendar. I took it up and looked inside. I wanted to make sure. Vayera was the day before he left Lubavitch. Hashem Amar HaMachaseh is a pasuk in Pashas Vayera. It took the Rebbe, first of all, it took the Rebbe weeks to get to Rostov. It took him more than a month to get to Rostov. And he didn't stay in Rostov. He traveled a lot. He was in a place called Aral or Ural, and he was thinking to settle in Ural. He tried to stay in Ural. The Pasha couldn't find an apartment. It was wartime. Everybody was running, and he was running. So there was a shortage of apartments away from the front. So he had to move till Rostov. So why does it say Rostov if he wasn't in Rostov? So he wrote to me. I asked a big maven, to me the biggest maven in these kinds of things. So he wrote back to me that some people are saying that the reason it says here Rostov, even though L'cha'ir he finished it in Lubavitch, is because he finished writing it in Rostov. Meaning, even the Maimorim which he said, he didn't necessarily write it before he said it. And even if he wrote it before he said it, oftentimes the Aschalos and the Siyumim, the beginnings and the ends, and the Ha'ares, the notes, and the Kitzurim, and the summaries he wrote later. And the people have all kinds of reasons why the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote in Rostov, even though it seems quite clear that as soon as the Rebbe Rashab left Lubavitch, the Bais stopped. But that's what it says here, that he finished saying it in Shabbos, Pashas Vayera, Tafesh Rav in Rostov. B'maimer HaMaschar, the Hashem Omar HaMachas Mevram, the Maimer begins the Pasuk. Hashem Omar HaMachas Mevram, and it's Kuf Mem Dal Maimorim. 144. The Samach Vav is 61. This is more than twice the size of the Samach Vav, plus Yesh Biksuvim Chelik Sheni. There is in manuscript a second Chelik, Shaloi Omer, which was never said, and all of this is printed today. It all is printed today. The Ayin Bais is all available. It was printed when I was a boy, before my Bar Mitzvah, Tafshin Lamed Zayin. The first krach came out for Yudtas Kislev. Second krach came out for Yud. I was a boy of 12. I remember my father. My father was already then no longer in Kodesh. He was a professional. My father worked in computers. He wasn't Zoiche to spend his life officially. Believe me, he did plenty of work for the Rebbe his whole life, but officially had a job. But I remember my father holding that volume in his hand at the Fabringen. They charged $1 for it. $1 it cost it. The Rebbe wanted everyone to be a partner in the printing, to take a part of the acharayas. I remember his excitement. My father started getting up for talk. We were little kids, and he would sit and learn Ayin Beis. It's a very important memory of ours that when the Ayin Beis came out, my father didn't stop till he learned it through. At the Stora Gelernt, Abalabos, if I shouldn't have been a mensch, up at the gate that is in Ayin Beis. I remember him getting up for several years till he finished the entire Ayin Beis. He sat by himself for a talk and learned Ayin Beis. It's a memory of mine. And when I'm talking about memories, the neighbor next door was Pinya Kunyan Alav Shalom. We slept in the front room. We would get up 4 or 5 in the morning, and he would sit with Gemaras. He would gelernt as Achteira. I can tell you, I'm a witness. The man who gesessen gelernt Tag und Nacht. He sat and learned. My father was learning Chassidus. He was learning Nigle. But this is my childhood. You understand? This is these kinds of memories have an incredible impact on a person. But I remember this as a child. My brother had the same memories. At 4 or 5 in the morning, we'd look through the window and it's just gelernt. And in the summertime, he'd sit on the porch. But he learned Gemara. My father was learning Chassidus. He learned Gemara and Halacha. It's Altein Teda. Like to the B'zel Meibishn. But anyway, so this is the Hayom Yom, that the Rebbe Rashab did the Ayin Beis. I want to sort of give you a sense of this. I'm going to start with a story, which is now printed in a sefer. I've told the story to a few people and they got very agitated. They got very nervous at me. Why they got nervous, basically, but for me this is not a matter of amunah. I learned the Ayin Beis, so I understand it. I don't just believe it, I understand it. It's very obvious. There's a sefer called Yisrael Neach HaGodl, which by Yisrael Neach Blinitsky. Yisrael Blinitsky from the first Tmimim. He was in Lubavitch in the early Samachs. He was born Mem Gimel. He was named Yisrael Neach. That means his family were Nezhin Chsidim. Then Yisrael Neach, Nezhin is the same year as the Rebbe Marash, Mem Gimel. He was born Mem Gimel. He passed away Mem Gimel, or something like that. He lived almost 100 years, Yisrael Neach. And he learned, he was like, good to cop, like Lubavitch. And when the hamsech Bais started to come out, the Rebbe started to say it. So some of the Maimorim, the Rebbe Rashab gave out his own Maimorim. At a certain point, the Rebbe Rashab stopped giving out his own Maimorim, but the Bachim were Hanochas. They had Hanochas of the Ayin Bais. Most of the Ayin Bais, the Rebbe Rashab did not give out the Ksavim. I think he only gave out to V'Yachal Yosef, to Vayigash Ayin Gimel, which is the end of a piece. He started it up again, Shvuas Ayin Gimel, but I think those Maimorim he no longer give out the Ksavim. But the Bachim had Hanochas. So Nech was already married, for sure, with children. And Ayin Gimel, Ayin Beis, he was married for many years. He was probably more than 10 years after the Chasana. But he learned Chassidus. And when he came to Lubavitch, he went over to the Frierdiker Rebbe and he asked the Frierdiker Rebbe a kasha. A stira from a maimer of a maimer. That in Ayin Beis it says like this, and in a different maimer it says like this. And the Frierdiker Rebbe told him, Di kasha kemen ish fregen. Weil der Ayin Beis is in Ganzen an ander Linie. Those were the Rebbe Rayatz's words. You can't ask this question because the Ayin Beis is a different line. It's a different track. It's a different track. It's a different track. You're asking a kasha of Maimed. These are two different versions. And they're taka astire because there's different tracks. I told this to people with Kochazach and Chassidus. They get very nervous. But it's a fact. The Rebbe Rashab and hamsech Beis is like rewriting Chassidus from scratch. Many of his Maimorim, some of the famous Maimorim of his, are rewritten in Ayin Beis, different than the first time. I mean, the differences are edel, are subtle, but it's a different shita. The Rebbe Rashab created a new shita in the hamsech Beis, which is different than before. If you have to use oisius, until then the shita is oisius oiris pshutim, and the hamsech Beis it's oiris mitzuyarim. Until then, the kav is a ha'arav seviv kalamin, and then in the Ayin Beis, the kav is the sherish and atzmas. I don't want to give you speeches, and you're not interested in speeches, but it's a whole new shita in Chassidus. And from the Ayin Beis till the Rebbe Rashab passed away, which is almost 10 years, which is 9 years, Karga 9 years, 8 years, all the Maimorim go in the new shita, which means that even the Maimorim is not a part of the Ayin Beis. You have Einzel Maimorim from Ayin Beis, and Ayin Gimel, and Ayin Dal, and Ayin Hey, and then of course Ayin Zayin, and then Ayin Ches, and Ayin Tes, and Pei, and Gepakt Sfarim. They all go in this new shita. The Rebbe Rashab created a new derech Chassidus, a much, much deeper shita Chassidus, which begins hamsech Beis. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see the juxtaposition, the comparison, the contrast. But there's something else about Ayin Beis. The Rebbe Rashab Maimorim often are very arichazik. He explains things very long. A moshel could be half a page. And the arichas is obviously very geschmack. It's funny when you read a moshel, which is not 3 words, but 20 lines. You know, it describes it, it gives you details, almost like a story. But they can confuse you. They confuse you. The arichas is sometimes confusing. You learn a page, remember the Rebbe Rashab, it's very easy to read. But it was very, very hard to keep track of because you get dazed by the amount of detail. When the Rebbe Rashab wrote Ayin Beis, he introduced a language which is very, very concise. Everything is quicker. It's quicker. And it's so quick that you can't misunderstand him. It's mamish like that. You learn the same thing in the Samach Vav and you're not sure what he means. The same thing in the Ayin Beis and it's crisp. It's so clear you cannot misunderstand. And when you compare the two, you see the extra words make it vague. They make it, to use the Lashon HaChasidus, oir. The conciseness of the hamsech Beis makes it chayes, seichel, gruntig. And the Rebbe spoke about it, our Rebbe spoke about it. And he says that the hamsech Beis, the most complicated in Yonim Chassidus, are explained with such clarity and with such conciseness, such crispness, that it's so easy to understand. It's a fact. It's true. And I will put it, in my opinion, personally, that change in style of writing begins with the Hamshech Eted, which is 2 years earlier, when the decade turned. In the Samachs, the style is, Mitzadachet, my bottom are easier, but there's more arichis. You learn through a sugya and you're not sure, Beginning with the hamsech, the Rebbe Rashab starts to make his points quicker and clearer and crisper. The Friedrich Rebbe says in the Sichos that when you look at my bottom of the Rebbe Rashab, you could see the level of the Bachrim. Because as the Bachrim grew in the understanding of the Siddur, my bottom changed. And he writes, from the Samach Vav until the Hamshech of Tisha Tav Shayim Bais, you see the Maimorim changing. In other words, as the Bachrim understood more what the Rebbe was doing, the Rebbe changed. And in the Ayin, there's no doubt about it. And the Ayin Bais for sure, the Rebbe Rashab began to write Maimorim. They're very deep. The Sugyas are very, very edel. And the language is shorter, but crisper. And you should know, I don't know how well you understand this. Our Rebbe's Maimorim, from the first decade, for sure, the first decade and a half, were in the same style. The Rebbe used to say Maimorim, and a lot of those Maimorim were Chazli Maimorim that were said in the Babich, by the Rebbe Rashab, by the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. But his style always is, he makes something so clear, so short, that you can't misunderstand. I saw Reb Nissen writes, Reb Nissen Nevenov was very into the Rebbe's Maimorim. When a Maimon from the Rebbe came, he would sit down, he would learn with Koch, and he would say, these are the same Maimorim we had in Lubavitch, but it's for this generation. Reb Nissen appreciated the change. Because in Lubavitch, Maimorim were more arichasdik, and arichas sometimes confuses you. Arichas doesn't mean more details, it means explaining each detail with more words, and sometimes the verboseness, the number of words makes you not sure. It means like this, means this. The Rebbe, in his Maimorim, the Ereshte Yodim, when he was basically, in later years, the Rebbe made his own Maimorim. But the first years, the Rebbe was repeating them from the earlier Rebbeim and Chadash in them. But the style is this. It's very much, I think, consistent with the style that you see in the Ayin Bais, where the Rebbe Rashab says things, Bekitze, kurz und scharf. You cannot misunderstand them. And yet it's so long. In other words, the size of the Ayin Bais does not reflect how well the ideas are explained. Forget it. The signet is more tamtzistic. 8 pages of Ayin Bais is like 15 pages of Samavav. It's so much more. You have to hold your head. You lose, you can finish for 3 words, you're lost. Samavav, you can lose the concentration for 5 lines and you're not lost. It's very stark and crisp. And the Rebbe Rashab put himself into this hemshech completely. First of all, he wrote it. In other words, he didn't just tell a mashpia, copy from here and copy from here and copy from here and glue it together. You know how my Maimorim were. All my Maimorim are based, the Rebbe took something from the earlier Rebbeim. The Rebbe, you see, the Rebbe wrote it himself. You have whole pages of Ayin Bais, which are based on, sometimes word for word, on the middle of the Rebbe, but the Rebbe Rashab wrote it himself. And Bichlal, a hemshech like this, he probably wrote before. He would write, and every Shabbos he would say a shtickle. But he was ahead. The hemshech Ayin Bais, the Rebbe Rashab did something which he didn't do by any other hemshech. Number one, he wrote notes. After he wrote it, he wrote corrections. And in the notebooks, in the Mechberes and the hemshech Ayin Bais, one notebook is the Maimorim themselves, the Ksav Yad Kedesh, as the Rebbe Rashab wrote them. Another notebook is the Hagos. So you would have in the Ksav, he used to make a circle. And the circle meant, oh, here goes a note. And you would have to look at a different page, or in the margins of the page, and you would see the corrections, the notes that the Rebbe was making. And he also wrote Haschalos V'Yom. Every mime has a beginning and an end, which he wrote B'Pashtus later. And in the Ayin Bais, the Haschalos V'Yom are not like the Samach Vav. They're a maimer. Sometimes the Haschalos see him alone as a maimer. And he also wrote Kitzur. He divided up into Parakim, and he wrote summaries. In the Samach Vav, the whole maimer is one long paragraph. I mean, if you buy a new Samach Vav, there's division of the paragraphs, but that was made by us, by the Metziim later. The Samach Vav, every maimer was one paragraph from the beginning to the end. In a few places, mamish, in a handful of places, you have a middle, an interruption, Piska Be'emtza Pasuk, in the middle of a maimer to be an interruption. But the Samach Vav that was printed in Tafshel Lamed Aleph, Tafshel Lamed, every maimer, the whole maimer is one long paragraph. And that's the whole number that Rebbe Shabar, the Ayin Ches, the Ayin Tes. He didn't divide maimer from the end of Ayin Tes and Pei, he started doing it again. But in the Ayin Bais, you saw that the Rebbe Rashab not only wrote to Maimorim, he went over, had a chviris. You saw how much he valued it. He edited it. He divided up into prakim. He wrote kitzurim, which he didn't do for other Maimorim. But the Ayin Bais is very, very special. And the end of it is that as soon as he left Lubavitch, he stopped saying the Ayin Bais, but he never stopped writing it. So he started saying other Maimorim, and the other Maimorim are also printed. There's a Sefer Tafresh Ayin Bais, Tafresh Ayin Vav, which you could buy in the store. which is the Maimorim that he didn't say, that he said during those few years that are not included in the hamsech. And then you have Seish Mam Tafresh Ayin Zayin, and then you have Tafresh Ayin Ches, and Tafresh Ayin Tes, and Tafresh Pei. A lot of Maimorim. It's several hundred Maimorim that the Rebbe Rashab said during those years, which are written in the sheet of the Ayin Beis and in the signet of the Ayin Beis, but they're not included in the Ayin Beis. But during all that time, he was writing more. In Tafresh Ayin Tes, there's a Maimer which the Rebbe Rashab said that I forgot, either in the Ayin Tes he's mitzayin to the Chelik Shalei Nitfas, or the Rebbe's talking the same inyan in the Ayin Tes, and you can see in the third volume near the end, he's talking the same thing and he references it. So the Rebbe Rashab never stopped writing the Ayin Beis. He kept on writing it till his Nistalkus, till his Petira. One of the most interesting Lashonos is, near the end of Ayin Beis, there's an expression. V'tzorech iyun, v'adayin lo iyanti. Imagine the Rebbe Rashab should write. V'tzorech iyun, this question needs to be examined further, and I have not had a chance to examine it. Now, in the early years of the Rebbe Rashab, in the Mems, that's normal. You have that often where the Rebbe Rashab will say, I'm not sure. But this is the last years of his life, mamish. And in those years, everything is, he answered all the questions. The Rebbe Rashab said, Heinz and Eshtok Astidus. The Rebbe Rashab said, I took away all the Stidus. I answered all the questions. All the big kashas the Maskilim used to have, I answered them in my Maimorim. And in Tafresh Ayin Tes, he writes in the third chelik of the Ayin Beis about a certain question, Tzorachin, I have to examine it further. V'adayin lo yayanti, I'm not finished. I'm still working on it. And as I'm sure you've heard the expressions where the Rebbe Rashab used to call it Ton and Chsidis. I don't know if you know this, that the Rebbe Rashab was very against people saying Pshotim in a Maimer. When you learn a Maimer, you have to understand Glat. Try to understand what the Rebbe is saying. Don't add, don't reinterpret, don't exaggerate. Try to understand them. And believe me, understanding a Maimer the way the Rebbe wrote it is plenty seichel. There's no shortage of iyun, there's no shortage of feeling like a smart guy. The Rebbe did not like when people said Pshat in Maimon. There's one exception, and the exception is if it's negay and avoida. And the Rebbe said this many times, but if I'm an English, if it's negay and avoida, then in other words it helps you serve the Eibishter better, then you can say a Pshat in Tanya, which is why when the Mashpiyim was to teach Tanya, the Mashpiyim would say Pshatim, not out Haskola, not out Limud, and Iyun, but out Avoidim. So one time, I saw this someplace, the Rebbe Rashab said this, that he doesn't like when people say Biyurim on Chassidus. Just say them as it is, except like it's in Tanya. So the Rebbe, his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, asked him, like the Ha'aras that you wrote, I think in the Maimer Abim. They printed Natomim once. Notes from the Rebbe Rashab on a Maimer of the Rebbe Marash. I think it's the Maimer Abim. So the Frierdiker Rebbe asked the Rebbe Rashab, is that what you mean when you say Inyoni Avoido? So I forgot what the Rebbe Rashab answered, but the Rebbe Rashab said there's also something else. And that something else is called Ton and Chassidus. He says, when you learn a Maimer, you learn the Maimer as it's written, you understand it as it's meant. As the Rebbe wants you to understand, and like, don't help him. It's good, it's enough. If it's again avoida, then you can embellish. You can explain. It's not going to be it up shot. But there's another thing. And the other thing is, Tanach Chassidus means to work on Chassidus. And Tanach Chassidus, the Rebbe Rashab, is a Rebbe, we don't talk in Chassidus. Tanach Chassidus means to work on Chassidus, to work Chassidus out. That's how you're trying to Tanach Chassidus. Meaning, there's a lot of sugis of Chassidus which you don't understand. There's a lot of sugis of Chassidus that are full of contradictions. There's a lot of sugis of Chassidus that don't make any sense. My modern, we have 7 generations of Torah. Remember, the Rebbe Rashab had all the Ksavim. We didn't have the Bichlach. The Rebbe Rashab had all the Ksavim. So there's a difference of Tanach Chassidus. Tanach Chassidus means you take a Maimer, or whatever it is, and you work on the Maimer to work the Maimer out, that the Maimer should make sense. And this is not a business for the faint of heart. This is for Rabbi Yossi, the Rabbeim Tanach Chassidus. And the Rebbe Rashab said that one of the things I've dedicated my life to is Tanach Chassidus. But the Rebbe Rashab, Tanach Chassidus, Anashen Anabreg. And then he said, noch da Pek was man nach schon geheben zu tun. Which means there are packs and packs of sugis and chassidus that I haven't even begun to touch. Meaning, all the Marim of the Rebbe Rashab, all the big Hamshechim, the Ayin Bais, the Samach Vav, and the Eter, and the Samach Tes, and the Samach Hey. There's so much. And the Rebbe says, there's pack and pack. There's so much more that I haven't even touched yet. And now that it's all printed, you could see. You know? Now the Rebbe said 2,000 Maimorim, which we have. All the Rabbeim repeated Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe. There were hundreds of Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe that no Rebbe ever repeated. Ever. Not the pack and pack. There's so much that the Rabbeim, the Maimorim of the Middle Rebbe that the later Rebbeim did not develop. Pack and pack. In other words, as much as we have, Chassidus is so big and so vast and so deep and so rich and so exact. Anyway, the Rebbe Rashab worked on the Ayin Bais, and he delighted in the Ayin Bais. And for some reason, after the beginning, the Bacham had the first, I think it's 26 Maimorim, from Shavuos Ayin Bais till Vayigash, Vayochel Yesav Ayin Gimel, which is the first Hemshech. Then the Rebbe Rashab stops, and he starts it up again, Shavuos Tafish Ayin Gimel. And that year, same thing, he starts Shavuos, and he goes till Vayera, Hashem Amar HaMachasa also, I think. And he stops again. And he starts Shavuos Ayin Dalet, which is right before the beginning of the First World War. And then he goes straight. Shavuos Ayin Dalet, it's a Shabbos after a Shabbos, the whole Ayin Dalet, every single Shabbos of Ayin Hay, which is 1915, into Tishrei Ayin Vav. So in other words, Hamshechim starts Shavuos till the winter and he stops. Shavuos till the winter and he stops until the Milchama, the World War I. I feel like the Hamshech Ayin Bais is very connected to the First World War, even though it was started 2 years earlier. And from Shavuos Ayin Dalet, every single Shabbos is a Maimer until he left Lubavitch. Which is the end of 1915, Tafresh Ayin Vav, after Tishrei. So the Rebbe Tashtag kocht in Hemshech. And of course the rest of that story is that the Rebbe said, I'm afraid to print it. Now let me give you a little bit of detail. There was a Yid in Eretz Yisrael, his name was Harav Yankov Landau. Harav Yankov Landau was a big chassid. He was a big Rav. He was the Rav of Bnei Brak. When he was the Rav of Bnei Brak had one Rav. He was a big lamb, he was a big gun of Yankov Landau, Harav Yankov Landau. He was very close to the Rebbe Rashab. And he very much wanted to print Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe printed in the first years the Kuntreis. The Kuntres HaTfilah, the Kuntres Umaya, the Kuntres Eitzachayim, and the Kuntres HaAvodah, and also the Kuntres that's called Chanech Lanad. It's the Rebbe Rashab's first tzavor. But that's it. They didn't print any money for the Rebbe Rashab. There was no money. They printed money for the Frierdiker Rebbe, obviously, and they printed for the Rebbe Marash. Why the Rebbe Marash? Because nobody asked me. But the Pashtus, because they didn't typeset, they just printed Kupir. They printed the Sefer's name. They printed Shmuel Sefer. They printed his handwriting. His handwriting is so clear, it's like a printed version. I mean, as a kid, you saw those bichlach. They've retyped them, but as children, we had my mother for the Rebbe Marash printed with the Ksav Yad of the copyist of Shmuel Sefer. So he was bothering the Rebbe to print the Hemshechim, Samavav and Ayin Bais. In 1949, Tafshin Tes, a letter from the Rebbe to Yankov Landau, where he writes to him, Ala Ayin Bais, quote, Yesh li harashus la'atfisei, avachosar emtsoim. I have my father-in-law's permission to print the Ayin Bais. I don't have the money. Chab nish de geld. Lapel, the Rebbe Rashab passed away, the Rebbe Rayatz passed away, and it was never printed. The Rebbe became Rebbe, he started printing Hasidus. Now, you must understand something which we really cannot fully understand, which is that the Rebbe saw the sakana in printing Hasidus. The Rebbe was passionate afraid. As much as the Rebbe said, Yefutzim and Asecha Chutza, the fact of the matter was that the Rebbe was hesitating. I told this to you, that Shazar got money from the Germans, from the cultural fund to print Svarim. So he told the Rebbe he'll give the Rebbe money, but he wants that the Rebbe should print my money with the Alter Rebbe. So the Rebbe printed 4 volumes with that money. And it says in the Krach, you look at the print, you'll see that it says this volume was published with a grant from the Jewish Heritage Fund. It was German money after the war. The 4th Krach said the Rebbe printed Yemot Es Halach Liyazne and Anachas Harab, and then 2 more Krachim, Tofkuf Samach Beis, Tofkuf Samach Ches. 1 year, for months at a time, every single Shabbos, the Rebbe said a maimer from that sefer, from the Alter Rebbe. Every single Shabbos, the Rebbe said a sefer. Ad kedei kach, that there was only one maimer that the Rebbe said Matzah Yom Kippurim. 1 year, the Rebbe said a Matzah Yom Kippur, Tavshich Avdalet, and it was also a maimer from that sefer. And it was very clear that the Rebbe was Pashat. He gave out a sefer of Chassidus, and he was saying a maimer a Shabbos nach a Shabbos. Now, of course, I wasn't born yet, so I don't remember it. But people have told me that the Rebbe said the maimerim because the Rebbe felt that it's not Pashat. You print Chassidus, it's an achrayis. By the Rebbe repeating them, he was forcing the Chassidim to learn them. A half a year maybe. Every Shabbos was a maimer from the same sefer, Tavkuf Samach Bais. So the Rebbe printed whatever it was. But the Rebbe, the first thing the Rebbe printed when he became Rebbe was the Friedrich Rebbe's maimerim and Sichos from America. In the Yuds, in the early Chafs, every year or two they got another volume. Tafshin Aleph, Tafshin Bais. The Friedrich Rebbe's Torah that he said here in America, the Rebbe gave out. There was not a lot of money. And then also the Sichos. Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Kayetz, Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Aleph, Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Bais, and Azay Vaiter. This the Rebbe started giving out. The Rebbe printed from Tzemach Tzedek, the Eira Teira. I mean, part of the reason was because it was offset. It had already been printed once before. The Rebbe was reprinting it. So I heard this from one of my teachers, that the Rebbe was printed the Eira Teira. Tzemach Tzedek's Eira Teira is not my modem. It's Rishimis, it's notes. Most of my modem, the Tzemach Tzedek, we never wrote out in longhand. He used to write notes. A maimer, which could be 45 minutes, could be 6 lines of notes. Just a modem okemis, and a little kvetcha hin, kvetcha her, star maimer. So the Rebbe starts printing the notes of the Tzemach Tzedek. So once at the Sudas upstairs, either the Rashag or Reb Shmuel asked the Rebbe, why are they printing the Eira Teiros? No one understands them. The Rebbe, if he wants to print my Tzemach Tzedek, so look in the Lahavin. The Tzemach Tzedek had my modem called Lahavin. Lahavin in Eritzof, Lahavin in Gimel B'chinas Adam. My modem that are written in longhand. We have them, now they're all printed in Eira Teira and Yonim. So why are you printing my modem? Nobody could use. Print my modem people are going to enjoy. You know, that was basically the question. And the Rebbe said, well, are you kidding? Tzemach Tzedek's my modem. You have over there Kol HaTorah Kula. You have Nigla and you have Halacha and you have Nisted and you have Diktuk and you have Chakira and you have Kabbalah. There's no part of Torah where you don't have Tzemach Tzedek. So he pressed, that, but nobody understands. After he asked twice or 3 times, the Rebbe said, I think it was a Shmuel, the Rebbe said, Men drukt azevi es kumtais. We print the way it comes out. And the person asking the question understood that this was the time to stop talking. What the Rebbe was saying is, this is Da'as Elyon, back off. You asked me for a pshat, I gave you a pshat. You asked me for a second pshat. I'm printing this way because this is how it has to be. And I think it was a Shmuel. He understood that now it was time not to ask anymore. The Rebbe told him, it's not your department. This is Da'as Elyon, you understand that? But the pashtus is, my modem that you understand less, the Rebbe printed. My modem that can't verstehen, the Rebbe pushed moeilig out to drucken. And it took many, many years for the Rebbe to sort of open up the floodgates and let them come out. I have another story that I heard. And this is for sure from the Rashag. Where the Rashag also wanted to get the Rebbe to print my modem that he remembered from Lubavitch. The Rashag was in Lubavitch. So he said that my modem until the Rebbe Rashag, you can't understand. And he went through the first 4 Rabbeim. He says the Alter Rebbe is Nekudus. The Mittel Rebbe had Chaneni Bechaz. He said the same thing over and over again. Tzemach Tzedek is Rishimis. And the Rebbe Marash is Medrashim. I mean, he just gave 4, he just took Torah 4 Rabbeim and he made them into Gonisht. But that's how we said it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe did not interrupt him. The Rebbe let him talk. But when he said about the Mamar, the Mittel Rebbe, that the Mittel Rebbe had Chaneni Bechaz, the Rebbe interrupted him. And he said, Yede Vort is B'diyuk. Every word is precise. The other 3 Rabbeim, he let him say what he said. But when he said about the Mittel Rebbe, so the Rebbe interrupted him. Yede, every word is precise. Anyway, the bottom line is that Rebbe did not give out the Maimorim that we wanted until he was ready. The first Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab was the Samach to Samach. It came out in 1965. It was the year I was born. It's a chassan of mine for the Friedrich Rebbe. The second was the Samach Vov. And I told you the story that in Tafshin Chavav, the next year after the Samach, the Rebbe came from the Oil Bais Nissen, and Chadakov called my Zaidi, Shusterman. It was a long day. He was already home from work. And he said, the Rebbe geheißen as Heint. So when all him Zetz in the Samach. Today, before the Shkia Bais Nissen, they should start typing the Samach. So my Zaidi went back to the shop, it was in Brooklyn, and he had linotype. You know, they used to use lead, molten lead. So he had to turn on the lead. It took a long time for the lead to cook, and then he started typing. And he sat that night, and he typed, maybe he took a typesetter with him, and they typed a few gellies, and they brought it to the Rebbe. To begin the summer, you know, gellies are long pages. They're not regular sheets. They're longer sheets. They started to type. Achan Shal Pesach that year, the Rebbe gave my grandfather a bottle of wine. This is for the Samach Vov. At some point, the Rebbe told him, I don't know what the point was. The Rebbe told him in the Yechidus, mit dem Samach Vov bin ich bunden zum Schwer, als ich darf sich mit dem allein abgeben. Regarding the Samach Vov, I have a commitment to the Rebbe, the Rebbe, that I have to do it myself. So it's very important to the Rebbe. So he started typing the Samach Vov, and then the Rebbe got a letter from someone in Eretz Yisrael, a Bacher, that he printed a couple of 100 copies of the Samach Vov Kupir, stencil, unofficial. If the Rebbe is going to print the Samach Vov, no one's going to buy it, he's going to lose his whole investment. So the Rebbe told Zaidi Shusterman to stop typing. So the guy shouldn't lose any money, you understand? That was, there's so many parts of the story, but the Rebbe's sensitivity. So it stopped. Rabbi Shaleib Rothstein was still alive. The secretary said, Rabbi Shaleib, you remember him, Mr. Yeah? Rabbi Shaleib? He was a Talmud. Rabbi Chadakov was the head of the Maskiris. But Rabbi Shaleib was the senior maskir. In other words, the boss was Chadakov. But Rabbi Shaleib set the tone up. He was a very Chassidish Yid. I'm sure Chadakov respected him. So Zaidi Shusterman told Rabbi Shaleib what happened. So Rabbi Shaleib said, you want my advice? If you ever have time and nobody's doing any work, continue typing the Samach Vov. So that's what he did. Whenever he had no work, he would continue. By the time the Rebbe asked to print it, it was almost all ready. So 5 years passed, Lamed Aleph, I think. Out of the blue, the Nuvas Herzog went in Samach Vov. So he told the Rebbe, I don't know if you know my grandfather, he was a Metzuyendik, he did that bottle of wine he put away. When they drank that wine 5 years later, I wonder what it tasted like. But he put it away. So Lamed Aleph, I think, the Rebbe says to him out of the blue, was Hetzach with Samach Vov. So he told the Rebbe told Gehes Nufa and Titan. So the Rebbe says, yeah, but now I want to print it. So the Zayda said to the Rebbe, but the Meshalev told me that Imetzossi Yasa is a Mamshach Zayin Titan, and it's almost ready. And the Rebbe's reaction was like, I forgot what he said. He was ready off Neil Memes. The Rebbe gave Mazah Brocha. The Rebbe was so happy. I forgot how it is. The Rebbe said something very beautiful in Akaras Atei for the Meshaleb's Pikches. So they printed the Samach Vov. The first 1971. That was this first, after the Samach. The Samach was the first sefer the Rebbe gave out from the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe put the front cover a picture of the Rebbe Rashab. Because the Rebbe used to say, when you learn a Maimah from a Rebbe, seeing his photo helps you understand. So since the Samach Vov was the first krach, the Rebbe put the picture of the Rebbe Rashab. And so when the book was printed, Zayn took out that bottle of wine from 5 years before, and he shared it with all the people that participated in the print. The next krach of the Siddur that were printed was hamsech Eter, which is Lamed Hey, 1975. Eter is echt a shtickle. Eter is, it's a sefer. It's a sefer. The hamsech Eter is about 200 pages in the old type. In the new type is probably 250 pages. And the Eter. The Eter was a choshev hemshech. There was a lady whose name was Leike. Her married name was Karasik. She was a Garari from home. She was a Zamagari's sister. She was very intelligent and she was a big masculine chassidus. She verstanden very good chassidus. Und sie hat gekocht in Eter. She enjoyed the Eter very much. She passed away in Lamed Hey. I think she had left money for printing a sefer of chassidus, And the Rebbe said they should print the eter in her schus, was jetzt gekocht, and ladies, they kocht eter. There's a story once that she was visiting here, and she'd go to the doctor, to the hospital, and the Rebbe came out to the car to see her off, and he gave her a maimed to take with her to the hospital. This was Leike Garari. Leike, her married name was Karasik. Leise Karasik. This heißt also Mrs. Chitrik's mother, and Mrs. Garari, Noska Garari's mother, and the third Eidim was Ashkenazi. Anyway, and the next was Ayin Bais, was Lamed Zayin, Ayin Bais. Although all the other Sfarim came out after Lamed Ches, Ayin Ches and Ayin Tes. I remember those Sfarim coming out. I was 11, I was 12 years old, I was a little boy. And the Rebbe spoke by Fabrengen, I'm afraid. But I want to print it very much. Now, you ask Akasha, if the Rebbe wrote in Tafshin Tes, 1949, Yesh vi Horishus Latfise, Bitamol, 25 years later he's afraid again. I think the word is, the Friedrich Rebbe gave me Rishus Latfise. Now it's his Rishus. So the Friedrich Rebbe gave Rishus, so it's on the Rebbe Rayatz's Cheshbon. Now it's on his Cheshbon. The Rebbe said, I'm afraid. So the Rebbe said, everybody should give $1. The Sefer is going to come out without any names. And everyone will be a shutuf, will spread it around, and there'll be less burden. And it came on very quick. Very quick. They typed it in. The first print of Ayin Beis is full of mistakes. Full. Because they typed it so quick. The first came out Yud Kislev, the second came out Yud Shvat, the third came out later the same year. And no artist, just pages, Maimer, nothing. And then the Rebbe had a heart attack the following year. The Rebbe retyped it in Nun Beis. The Rebbe retyped it. And then was the stroke. I mean, I'm not the first one to think of this. It's clear that the Ayin Beis was a serious business. It was not a joke, the printing of the Ayin Beis. But, here's the but. Label Groner described, Allah Shalom, walking into the Rebbe's room with the first volume of Ayin Beis and handing it to the Rebbe. Said the simcha by the Rebbe was unimaginable. He was so happy to see it. In other words, the Rebbe, the Rebbe was pasha b'simcha atzuma, but the Ayin Beis was printed. It was a gilui of chassidus. Anyway, after Lamed Ches, after the heart attack, then everything changed. The Rebbe hired a few people to work full time, and between Tafshin Lamed Ches and 19 Tafshin and Bais, which is about 15 years, if you say the Rebbe gave out 150 krachim of original chassidus, that's Leishas Vasamayim. I don't think it's a guzman. That's an average 15 years, 10 krachim a year. A whole set of Mamad Alter Rebbe, at least 20 volumes. A whole set of Nitlav Naimarim, at least 20 volumes. A whole bunch of Mamarim from the Tzemach Tzedek, almost as many from the Rebbe Marash, and then from the Rebbe Rashab Tzvidik Rebbe. It was so much, so fast. And maybe not 100, maybe 100. But you know what it means? You're talking about Maimonic Chassidus that were held by the Rabbeim for 250 years, and in 1.5 decades, it's available if everybody wants. You know, the bizbaz are ages that you have in Basi Lagani. We saw it happen in such a short time. Now they're reworking these Sfarim. They're taking those Sfarim now. They're working slower. They're writing Ha'aris and they're fixing them because everything was a rush. The Rebbe wanted a new krach for every year with the Pagre. There's 6 Rabbeim, everyone has a yahrzeit, everyone has a birthday, everyone has a Chag HaGula, so you have, he wanted for each year with the Pagre a new krach. How do you do that? Anyway, okay, I'll see you when I see you.